you an amazing guest on this show. Today, I have somebody who I've been, in fact, I would say like I've been admiring their journey, their growth. We are probably diametrically opposite when it comes to south and north of India. We have Shantanu Mukul, one of the founders of Iksana Coworking, joining us from Dehradun. And as you know, I'm joining from Chennai, so this is probably the first show where the guests are as far as apart as we are. But having said that, and the reason why I said I admire their journey is that Iksana has kind of come to become a formidable force of co-working in India. Their growth has been mercurial in the last 1 year or so. We'll hear more on that and what's given the thrust to Iksana as a brand to grow. But first, Shantanu, thank you for taking your time out, being a part of this webinar, and thank you for coming on to share your thoughts and your perspectives on co-working in tier two cities, and how do you see that spurring the growth of industries and businesses in tier two cities. But before that, I would love you to uh, uh, give a slightly more detailed introduction of yourself, about Iksana, and the story behind how it all began.
Sure. Thanks for your kind words, Sham, and thanks for having me on your platform and look forward to the discussion today. So, a little bit about Iksana. So, Iksana is a co-working and a flexible workspace provider slash accelerator, and we are predominantly based out of Dehradun, but we are going to be growing into other tier two, tier three cities in the coming years. On the co-working and the flexible workspace side, we provide modern, premium, and dynamically designed workspaces in Uttarakhand, in Dehradun more specifically. And in terms of key USPs about our workspaces, we are tech-enabled. All our workspaces are hospitality-led amenities and services. So the idea is that you are providing hospitality-like and hotel-like services and amenities in the office space. So
Right.
essentially, which means while you're giving them a workspace, you're also providing a serviced cafeteria, business center, meeting rooms, conference rooms, lounges, coffee bars, maintenance, concierge, community events, fitness center, etc. And we cater to a range. We have a range of different workspace solutions to accommodate teams of all sizes and business needs, which is a very interesting part of being in this business because we get to interact with individual freelancers, individual professionals, small
Right.
teams, startups, MSMEs, scaling businesses, and even established enterprises. And one of the things that we try and imbibe in the workspaces is that we want it to be a community. uh, Members who work at our centers are logged in 10 to 12 hours a day, sometimes 5, sometimes 6 days a week. So the place where they're working should be welcoming, inviting, energizing. It should aid their mood and productivity. And the way that we have grown, so a little bit about our size. Now our entry and both growth in this space, which I can label it as co-working and flexible workspace because they're two different segments,
Right.
has happened in a very, very organic manner.
Hmm.
So we have been in Dehradun since 2006. And what brought us to Dehradun was that we were setting up a back office center for a US-based debt collection process.
Right.
Thereafter, in 2011, we also started an IT startup, which had its R&D center in Dehradun, given the proximity that that city has to universities and the availability of IT talent pool.
Right.
And at that time, which is 2011 around, the workspace infrastructure in Dehradun only comprised of standalone Grade B, Grade C infrastructure with limited services and amenities.
Right.
And we couldn't really find the ideal workspace for our team commensurate to how our other team was operating in other locations like Bangalore, Pune, and Gurgaon. So
Right.
we ended up developing the facility ourselves to house our own team. Now, when we reached 2018 and 19, the general business ecosystem was growing in Dehradun. And that was the time when we launched our first co-working center to provide the same category of workspace amenities in Dehradun that IT firms, enterprises, startups are used to in other tier two and tier three cities. So when we set up the first co-working center, it was a lakh of square foot with about more than 1,700 workstations. And the center got occupied very, very quickly. and there was a temporary hurdle during the COVID lockdown, but very soon after the relaxations, it again bounced back. So this made us realize that there was a meaningful and somewhat unaddressed demand that for good quality workspace services in Dehradun, and there was no other company in Dehradun or no brand or company, whether it is a national brand or a local brand, which was providing this in Dehradun.
Right.
So, and if you see the customer expectations, so you have all sorts of members which are local to Dehradun and also who are relocating from other parts of the country. So they have certain demands and expectations of what they expect. So to
Right.
cater to this demand, we set up this center and then we organically grew with this increased demand that we saw. Today we have four operational centers in Dehradun. There are four locations. There are about capacity of 3,000 workstations today. We've signed up another center, which is going to be launching by the end of this financial year with about 800 workstations. So by the end of this year, I think we'll be on a 2.2 lakh square foot, about five locations and 4,000 plus workstations in Dehradun.
Right.
Uh, if I can just add to that, so this was the workspace vertical that I spoke about, but we are also more than just workspaces. So we are also a business accelerator based out of Dehradun.
Right.
So there are a range of services that we provide in the nature of business support services, and we provide these services to startups, to established MSMEs, to global corporations. And these could be in the context of a starter toolkit. So basically, business incorporation, compliances, registrations, hiring, payroll. So if a company is setting up, helping them set up the company structure, getting the compliances right. Then we also provide shared services. So this is a very interesting model that we work on, where
Right.
we have a team of very senior industry CXOs who have been CEOs and CFOs, CMOs, CTOs of some very large companies. But for a startup or an MSME to afford their services on a full-time basis, firstly, there may not be a need. A
Correct.
startup or a growing SME may not need a full-time senior industry professional. So secondly is the cost element that they may not be able to afford it, but they still want the guidance from them. So what we have is we have an in-house CXO team
Okay.
that comprising of senior management who have been in the industry in different sectors in India, globally, working in very, very large companies, leading various portfolios in those companies. And what we do is that we help on a strategic level create the systems and processes as a virtual CXO for
Right.
our members, and thereafter at the right stage we bring in the right level of team to help it on the day-to-day execution, because some
Got
of
it.
these functions, while they can be done from an outsourced model, but beyond the point you need an in-house person, but we help them guide.
Got it.
And we are also providing under the shared services, we provide human resources, talent acquisition, legal services, accounting, taxation, and now we are also in the process of growing this part acceleration program to actually address the startup member base that is evolving in Dehradun and trying to connect them to angel investors, VC, and mentors and experts. So
Got it.
that is the trajectory we are going to for Iksana, where we will be consolidating our first mover advantage, and we are the largest operator in Dehradun. We
Yeah.
are trying to add the acceleration bit of it, and now we want to expand to other tier two cities, unexplored and undiscovered markets, which could be Coimbatore, Jaipur, Indore, Goa. So
Yeah.
that's the next phase of growth for us.
Now, amazing to hear the story, right? And like with many businesses, right, you feel the pain, right? And your pain drives you to creatively find a solution for that. And in that process, you realize that why don't I solve it for others, right? And I love the way in which you've, from being a bare metal office solution provider to support services that you spoke about. Then you spoke about the acceleration part, right? So there's a lot of it's like it's how do I say, right? Many co-working spaces have done this after growing, after putting like 30, 40 centers. They try to create an ecosystem, right, around themselves and all that, right? But you've kind of begun that with, as an integral part of what you want to be called for, right? What you want to be known for. I think that's a very interesting way that in which this has begun. And again, I'm very sure that all of this is again from the fact that you probably would have faced all these challenges in your
Correct.
early journeys, and you want to kind of solve for that. So it's kind of bringing together multiple pain points and solving for that. So amazing story there, Shantanu. One thing that for me, again, I'm not anywhere from that part of the country, right? The closest I've gotten to is like I did my bachelor's in Banaras, so that's the closest
Mm.
I've got there. But when I had some batchmates from Dehradun, right? So Dehradun in particular, and you're also exploring other tier two markets, Jaipur, and you spoke about a few others, Coimbatore, and all that, right? So what are the seismic shift trends that you're seeing in tier two markets that is driving this demand for, when we'll come to the co-working part of the flex industry part, but in general, even like a very interesting NASCOM study that came out, like it's a little dated, so it came like 9 to 10 months back, uh, kind of had a very drastic graph that said that um, 4 years back, the number of cities that were contributing to the ITES, KPO revenue or knowledge work revenue for India were concentrated in 5 cities, right? And
Mm.
as of 2023, there are it's kind of diversified into 17 different cities, right? So that kind of shows that there is certainly decentralization from, obviously talent supply was always there, right? Talent was always there coming from tier two cities. There was like people would migrate to a tier one city to have a job, right? Talent, the supply was always there, right? But what is making companies now set shop in tier two cities, right? What, how is that economic value chain getting reimagined from a tier two city perspective, right? And again, from your perspective, why do you see that? Because again, that's what is a fundamental need for a player like you, right? So what do you think is the reason now, and specifically the post pandemic, what do you think is the reason now?
Sure. So, Sham, this is an interesting question and it has multiple dimensions and nuances around it. So, if I first just zoom out and talk about the co working and the flexible workspace sector, so far, if you see, the growth has been in technically tier one and tech driven cities, right? Whether it is Bangalore, Delhi, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Pune, Chennai. And I would consider Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai as tier one in the category for co working now, and I think majority of the growth happened in these cities. However, one thing is very clear, and it's a fact now that the flexible workspace and the co-working industry is definitely gaining very strong momentum in tier two and tier three markets, and it's most definitely a positive trend.
Right.
And moving forward, as you mentioned, the NASCOM report, there are multiple other reports from JLL, CBRE, Upflex, Anarok, etc., where many people, many stakeholders are saying that the large part of the growth of this sector, which is co-working and flexible, will now come from tier two and tier three cities. And these are reports, but if you see market practice as well, bigger companies like AWFIS, IndyCube, etc., if you see their expansion, they
Right.
are have a very uh, significant expansion in markets like Lucknow, Coimbatore, Bhubaneswar, Jaipur, Indore, Kochi, Nagpur. Davex, I understand, is also big into Ahmedabad, Chandigarh, and Indore. They're expanding fast now, and we are doing it in Dehradun, for example. Now, to answer your question now as to what is driving this growth in tier two and tier three cities, I will not pinpoint and say that there's one single reason for it. There are a
Mhm.
number of different factors which together are leading to this growth, and these are both driven macro growth, micro growth, certain changes with COVID, etc. So if I can name a few, the the most obvious one is cost advantage, right? Both in terms of lower operational infrastructure and living costs, which are
Right.
much lower, which are definitely lower. I would not put a number to it, but it is definitely lower in tier two and tier three cities compared to tier one. Secondly, from our own personal experience, a lot of companies that we cater to in Dehradun, which are large companies who have multiple locations across India and globally, when we asked them as to what made them decide to come to Dehradun or Chandigarh, there is a business continuity angle which is there in these larger companies, where
Right.
they do need geographical diversification plans as part of their business continuity. And I'm talking about bigger companies here, where they don't want to uh, have all their eggs in the same basket and being in a single city, single location.
Right.
Thirdly,
Right.
as you rightly mentioned, there is an availability of talent pool in different tier two, tier three markets, and Dehradun being one where there are a lot of good institutions. Similar in Jaipur, there are a lot of good institutions. So a lot of the availability of skilled talent pool, which you're seeing in the tier two and tier three markets. And what is very interesting is that when you're operating in a tier one, there are so many opportunities that are there for employees that employee retention is also a very, very difficult task. What we have seen when we ask our members that their attrition rates are a lot better, more desirable in tier two, tier three markets, because firstly in tier two, tier three, the number of companies which are providing good quality employment opportunities is relatively lesser.
Right.
People are more loyal to the companies that they work with. So generally, in terms of employee satisfaction, job satisfaction, all of this contributes to employee retention.
Right.
Another another growing factor which comes from the macro now is the investment that has happened in improving the connectivity to tier two, tier three cities.
Right.
If I
Right.
specifically talk about Dehradun, I've been there since 2006, but in the last 5 to 6 years, the Dehradun airport, in terms of flight connectivity, is linked to every major tier one city with multiple flights on a daily basis. Vande Bharat has come, road connectivity has improved.
Right.
Separately, I think the digital infrastructure in tier two markets have tier two and tier three cities have also increased and can give good feedback to the government to drive this. And now coming to the last three factors which I think are contributing to this growth in tier two, tier three cities. One being generating from COVID, right? So uh, while COVID has been a buzzword which is being used whenever we have to talk about any kind of industry movement or industry trend, but from a meaningfully and genuinely in this industry and having been in this industry just before COVID started, during COVID, and now after COVID, you can see very, very tangible reverse migration, firstly, which happened, where a
Correct.
lot of workers and employees who worked in tier one cities moved back to their hometowns.
Right.
Secondly, there was a meaningful and long-lasting shift in the mindset of both employees and employers, where uh, people got used to the fact that there could be people where they're remotely working, they're working from home, they're working from other locations, and there is a good work-life balance which can happen when a worker goes back to their own hometown and works from there while still having the opportunity of a tier one
Right.
kind of company. Because firstly, they save on a lot of rent, they save on a lot of cost, they stay close to their family, and that is one. So that's the social factor I would say which has contributed. Secondly, I think there are certain cities which provide a lot of improvement in standard of living, quality of life. So, for example, there are those fresh air you can breathe. Commuting to work takes less than 5 minutes. So, in Dehradun, for example, any commute which is more than 10 to 15 minutes is considered to be distance. It's too far away.
Right.
Bangalore, if I've heard, it can take 2 hours to commute to office.
Yeah.
General quality of living, these factors are contributing. And I think the last macro factor which is contributing would technically be the growth of the startup and MSME sector in different cities, right? So how Startup India was a central initiative, a central policy initiative of the central government. However, every state government
Correct.
technically set up their own nodal state startup cells, if I can call them. And what was very promising, so I was attending a conference yesterday where the Atal Incubation Yojana, which is a Niti Aayog program,
Right.
which technically they set up these incubation centers in different states in collaboration with the governments of those states.
Correct.
It was very, very interesting to see. While I have my own thoughts about the efficacy of a government backed or a government funded incubator versus a private incubator like us or a private funder. However, what is interesting to see is at least the ecosystem is being promoted in every state, because genuinely a lot of effort is being put, say, in cities like Jaipur, Dehradun Startup Cell, Indore Startup Cell, Chennai Startup Cell, to grow the local ecosystem, which is seeing a lot of growth from startups and SMEs coming from tier two cities.
Right. for
I
sure.
think so. A lot of the combination of these factors, I think, is driving a lot of the growth of tier two cities generally, and as well as the co-working and flexible industry in
Right.
these cities.
I think you covered it quite nicely. In fact, you covered it both the macro factors, right, and regional factors, and also uh, company's perspective, right? Like having a business continuity, lower cost of living, and all that. Multiple factors, right? And and GoFloaters and Iksana got connected with one of those factors, right? We from our client base, we saw they were actually having these companies were promoting flexible work. A lot of their employees prefer to be near, I mean, in their hometown or near a place where they wanted to have a life, right? A sustainable living, and like you said, right? Multiple factors, right? They wanted to move away from the hustle and bustle of a tier one city. They were done with it, right? So, and again, that's where our relationship also started, where we had a lot of our employees of the clients that we work with, were loving to come to a place like Iksana to spend, I mean, work, get a day of productive work done, yet have the opportunity to meet like-minded professionals in the center, right? The
Correct.
community and all that, right? So I think that's another trend that's kind of come to stay, right? It's going to kind of going to kind of spur the growth further, at least from a hybrid work, remote work standpoint. But then again, like you're saying, there are businesses that are moving their how to say, right? Moving their
Second or third, one of some of the offshore centers or the second or third locations,
Correct,
I would
you're
say.
absolutely right. So, and again, I'm kind of hearing that a lot of companies that are the GCCs, as they're called, right? They are even, they're not even looking at, many of them are not even looking at tier one cities as their first landing point in India, right? They
Correct.
directly have to jump to a tier two city like a Coimbatore or even Madurai, or I'm sure it's happening in Dehradun. Is that because the location advantage that tier one cities had till some time back, like from a connectivity
Correct.
standpoint and all that, a lot of the advantages are almost now there's an equal playing ground, right, between tier one and tier two cities. And then when you get the labor, I mean, the cost of an employee is going to be relatively lower, and like you said, stickiness factor is higher. Now with you guys in the infrastructure part is also taken care of. The office infrastructure part is also taken care of. So a lot of ticks there for them to kind of embrace tier two to begin with, right?
Correct.
Having said that, we
Correct.
spoke about lot of the things that are helping the growth of the sector, right? But again, coming to the other part of it, right? What continue to be challenges for an operator such as yours in a tier two market, right? So, for example, I was like a few podcasts before, I was connecting with Kushal from my branch, right? Another very formidable player in the tier
Correct.
two space, and I've
Correct.
connected with Mr. Sun from within Q Space, with Devex, and all the other operators who also have a very strong regional presence in tier two markets that they belong to, right? Uh, they tabled a few challenges. One primary challenge being the developers are yet to catch up with this trend, right? So in terms of providing grade A supply in these markets, right? But from your perspective, what do you see are the challenges that as an industry, flex industry, you need to overcome, or the larger picture being real estate as an industry, what are the challenges that continue to remain that uh, prove to be hurdles for you for your growth?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So, if I can talk specifically about our own experience in a tier two market like Dehradun, and Dehradun is also an upcoming tier two market, I would say, where while I do definitely think that it's at the same level now as a Chandigarh, Indore, and Jaipur, but it is yet to be established as a business hub in the minds of
Very
multiple
true.
stakeholders, which we are
Right.
trying to do. Now, coming to the local nuances, if I can speak about Dehradun and it may resonate with other tier two operators, would be that at least in Dehradun, when we launched in 2018, which is about 6 years ago now, firstly, we had to create awareness about what is co-working, what is flexible workspaces, what are these services, what are these amenities that we're talking about. And
Right.
it took time, at least for the local ecosystem, to get used to compared to a traditional office setting.
True.
Secondly, as you very rightly said, and what Mr. Kushal Bhargava also said, that in tier 2, tier 3 cities, there is a lack of availability of ready to plug in grade A infrastructure. So, for example, even with Iksana on our growth journeys, we currently have 4 operational centers. But for each of these centers, when we sign up, there is a hand holding that we have to do with the landlord owner or the property owner to first bring it to a grade A infrastructure. So there is a time and cost which goes into first getting that infrastructure ready.
Right.
And that is where I think our partner relationships have to be slightly more intimate,
True.
because while there could be different models where either the landlord owner or the property owner does the capex and fit outs versus what we can also provide, and that is the most substantial cost in launching is the capex. So there could be different models where sometimes a landlord funds it, sometimes we fund it. But where a landlord is funding, there's a level of trust and partnership that you have to evolve to be able to guide them to develop it and bring it to a certain level. That is the first
Right.
point.
Right.
The second, I would not call it challenge, but an interesting nuance that we have to deal with is that we have to have a very, very frugal business model. And I think that when we're operating in a tier 2, tier 3 city, compared to how the business models are structured for co working operators in tier 1, and I've spoken to a bunch of different founders of co working companies in Delhi and Gurgaon, for example, and Noida. And just when we exchange notes, the business models, the structuring, how they have done versus what we have done is sometimes very different. So one thing which is very interesting is the price point. Ultimately, price point becomes very important as to what price point you're giving this service at.
Right.
Now, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, while the expectations and demands were not there in tier 2, tier 3 cities, however, now with reverse migration, more people knowing about what a WeWork or a co-work can offer in a city like Delhi, Bangalore, the expectation of your members is of a similar level of infrastructure, amenities, and services to what they're used to say in Delhi, Gurgaon, and Bangalore.
Right.
But
Right.
so if in Dehradun, it's not like that they will say that okay, it's a tier 2 city, so we're okay for a lesser amenities. They still want premium A grade amenitized services, hospitality led services,
True.
everything.
True.
But however, and I will want to say SMEs and larger companies, when they come to a tier 2 city, because of the one of the reasons is the P&L, right? So when they come to a tier 2 city, they come with a very, very heavy demand that we are coming to a tier 2 city where we want a cost cutting in human capital. So if we are paying, if say someone 100 rupees in Chennai, a startup position, we want the same resource, same qualities for 60 rupees in Dehradun, because when we hire at volume, that is where we'll get a cost advantage which you can justify.
Right.
Secondly is infra. Secondly is the infra cost that they get. But they still want the same level of quality services and amenities because
Correct.
they're coming from tier 1 markets. Secondly, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, there is, while our customer base does include large corporates, their project offices, their offshore centers, GCCs, back office BPOs, KPO, LPO processes, but there is still a substantial member base which comprises of startups and SMEs, MSMEs,
Right. Right.
and they are also slightly price sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And third thing which is there is that uh, the local market catches up.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we have brought in this Iksana as a brand, bringing in certain operating processes, certain level of SLAs and service qualities infra from having gotten inspired by how other cities are doing it, right? Now, these local players are yet to catch up on it, the local office owners, the local space providers, but they try and emulate your model. And in doing that, there is a lot of price competition that you face from the local community. So now,
Right.
in this context, one of the challenges that you see in a tier two market for an operator like us is how to grow this your inventory, provide the same quality of infra and amenities and services, but in a more cost-effective manner, which is significantly lesser than what co-working operators say charge in Delhi, Bangalore,
Right.
because the per seat cost that you see that a WeWork offers in Delhi, Gurgaon would be 3x more than what a tier 2, tier 3 center has to offer. But if you look at the infrastructure, it will not be that drastic a change versus our center than a WeWork center.
Sure. Sure.
Now, so the way that we have had to grow in a frugal business model is what technically is something different when you're in a tier two, tier three market versus when you're in a tier one market. So
Right.
if I can say high level, what comes to my mind in terms of how we have optimized our costs to be able to give it at a better price to our customers.
Right.
Firstly, we are growing in a very asset-light model, as I said, through very, very good relationships with the property owners and landlords. And that is a very, very important factor because the most expensive cost for a property co-working operator and a flexible operator is their capex to the property owner, the lease charges or the revenue share. So if you have a good partner there, one part of the difficult puzzle is solved.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, uh, we try and run a cluster approach where ours we might have 6 locations, but they're in a cluster. So
Right.
your resource optimization can be better in terms of sharing one single resource across the different cluster, and this
Very
is something which even bigger tier one companies do. And then, of course, there are frugal, dynamic procurement processes, operational modalities that we do. So
So I think
that is a
the cluster approach is, so sorry to interrupt you, right? So the cluster approach,
yes.
in fact, I was going to ask you as that as a question, right? What took Iksana 4 centers in Dehradun before launching the fifth one or the sixth one outside of Dehradun, right? So I think, like you said, this cluster approach of trying to um, go deeper into one market, right? And also it being a strategy for you to be able to like share the costs across multiple centers, share the resources across multiple centers, right? um, that in itself is an advantage, right? For that, even though you've kind of uh, you become the king of the hill before you start to kind of move on to the next one, right? So I think it's a pattern that I'm kind of seeing from many other operators as well, right? They take Lucknow and then go extremely deep in Lucknow, or they take Coimbatore and go extremely deep in Coimbatore before they set outside. But I think the just one offshoot question that I had there, Shantanu, was like, do you see models like the developer or the property owner co-working operator models, right? So from a revenue share to as a service on top of a property, or a shared cost model, or different models, right? Do you see different unique models emerging for tier 2 markets that are not prevalent or not possible in a tier 1 market? Do you see any difference in the way an operator like you would collaborate with the property owner in a tier 2 market?
I would definitely say that it's a more favorable environment in tier two, tier three markets as far as that relationship is concerned. Because when you are operating in a tier one or a tier two city and you're operating, say, in a premium address, premium location, so your leverage and negotiating power with the landlords and the property owners is slightly more challenging. And uh, there, I think there are see, there are different mod. There's no one size fit all approach in terms of operator and landlord collaborations. But I have, from my personal knowledge, seen that in tier one cities, premium locations, it's morely a lease, right? So the co-working operators and flexible operators like us actually take on lease the properties. What is more favorable in a tier two, tier three city would be because it's an undiscovered market.
Right,
The property owner or developer may not have enough leverage, or they may not have enough monetization or a realization from their properties. They are more open to doing a more creative partnership with a co-working and flexible operator like us, where they share the risk and the reward.
right,
So I'm not sure. So in a tier one market, I think the risk is passed on to the co-working operator, and unless you are backed by a very very big developer group, where you are in the infrastructure development group and you have deep pockets, or you're backed by funding from, say, a VC or a private equity player, uh, you don't have that appetite as a growing or a new co-working brand to be able to take on those commitments of fixed leases to your
right,
property. And in tier one markets, more often than not, they shift the risk to us. But in tier two, tier three cities, because of the demand and supply and the price point. So, for example, in a tier two, tier three market, the same property, which, if suppose hypothetically the property owner gives it out as a bare shell to someone,
right,
whatever the yield that they fetch, if a co-working company comes into the picture, firstly, they would be fetching, say, in our own experience, a 30 to 40% premium over what they would have got otherwise.
Right,
Secondly, the property profile really improves because of the improvements that we drive.
right,
So I think on that front, tier two, tier three market is more favorable where the landlords and property owners share the risk and reward. So if the property does not do well for any reason, they contribute in the losses. If it does very well, then they get a pie of the profits.
right, right. No, very, very truly said. And in fact, even in tier two, so the model that you're talking about, right? I'm kind of starting to see in a tier one market in the off-center locations as well as in non-CBD locations as well, right? Where developers want to increase the perception of their profile of the property, right? Every city, right? So if I take Chennai, beyond three micro markets, co-working does not exist beyond three micro markets, right? So when somebody is newly trying to launch it in a off CBD center, then you are seeing these newer creative models being structured where it's more risk reward for both sides rather than one person taking all the risk. I think very and again that in my opinion for a lot of tier two players, the frugality that you spoke about, the creative relationships and models with tier developers, and being profitable at a relatively smaller size of a center, right? Compared to let's say a WeWork or a CoWork that might probably have 2,000 seats, and for them 50% to 60% has to be occupied for them to be able to break even. Now you're able to achieve that with much smaller floor plates and much smaller, let's say, seat occupancy ratios, right? That becomes the cutting edge or the how to say it, secret sauce for a player like you, right? You can't lift and shift a model, the WeWork model or a CoWork model into a tier two city, right? So that's where I think Iksana as a brand and other similar brands have the edge over because you have refined this model to be frugal and be profitable, right?
See,
Small,
that also Shasham is out of necessity because see,
yeah, yeah,
companies like WeWork and all are funded by very, very big real estate developer groups, right? And they have the appetite to put an upfront cost
right,
and have their profitability come at a later stage. But for us, where we are growing organically, we are bootstrapped and we are growing in that manner, it is the business necessity for us to grow in a manner where we are cash flow positive from day
right,
one.
right,
Our expansion is commensurate to our revenues and profits. So that is something, and you're right, absolutely right, that the kind of operating models and processes that get developed by us technically take care of this business necessity versus say a WeWork and all where their services, their team sizes, their operating models are very elaborate compared to ours.
right, right. Very true. Very true. So moving on to the last segment, Shantanu, I think we can keep talking about this because this is very
Correct.
like close to heart topic for the two of us, right? Now coming to the last segment of this session, is that what do you? I mean, for Iksana as a brand, what is the outlook like? If you look into the crystal ball, 2017, you said you started, right? And then you had 18, sorry, and then you had obviously COVID might have been a little bit of a kink, but then after the kink, you emerged even more stronger, and you've added four locations, adding the fifth one very soon outside of Dehradun, right? So, what do you see as the crystal? What does the crystal ball tell you? What are you gearing up to? And you already spoke about a few markets that you are very closely looking at in terms of establishing the next center there, right? So, how do you see this going for Iksana as a brand, and how do you see this going for the flex industry in general, and for tier two markets alone? What
Understand.
does the outlook look like?
Before I come to that question, if I can just add one more point, which I thought is interesting, maybe for your audience as well, on your
Sure,
last question, in terms
sure,
of the challenges, I'll just be very, very brief on this. That one of the challenges that we see in a tier two or tier three center, something like a Dehradun or a Jaipur, that whenever you are, say, if you're a co-working operator, say in a Bangalore or a Pune, no company will doubt that city. So, but in a tier two market or a tier three market like Dehradun, for example, we have to actually build up a ramp up plan for at least the bigger organization and the enterprise customers, where they need to be first confident about Dehradun as a city for them in terms of
correct,
talent
correct,
availability, infra availability, etc. So we have to actually build a ramp up plan for them, which is a very, very creative ramp up plan that you have to build to be able to first allow them to test the market, do their uh, 5 6 months of operations, see that they are getting the good talent, good infra,
That,
good
yeah.
quality, and then they move in. And one other interesting
Your team structuring with the clients also have to be more creative, basically.
more creative. And what is also interesting, even in cities like Jaipur, Dehradun, Coimbatore, etc., that those cities are also expanding, right? So what? So within the city, commute is expanding. So
Right,
example from Dehradun, earlier the commute from one end of the city to the other end of the city used to be 15 to 20 minutes. Then it became 30 to 40 minutes. Now it can take 1 to 1.5 hours. Mindset of people has also changed in terms of wanting a workspace closer to their home where the commute time is lower. So
right,
that has created another industry demand where the micro clusters even within a tier two, tier three cities. You would imagine that there would be one big center like our center. From a Dehradun perspective, someone might say that a 1 lakh square feet, 2,000 seat center is more than enough for the entire city.
right.
But the demand that we saw, we had to launch more centers to cater to that demand. And now we are also getting demand from customers asking us to set up in different pockets of Dehradun
Right, right,
so that they can have the same center or the same quality of service in a different center. Now,
right,
coming to your question on the if we zoom out on the flexible, see what is very interesting is that we happen to come into this industry in an organic manner and we continued growing. And because we, along in terms of our founding team, it is me, my co-founder is my brother, and my father, who's also been in the industry for a very long time. He's our mentor.
right.
So that is how we have grown very, very organically. We were not from the co-working industry or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a lawyer by education and profession. My brother has a hospitality background, and my father has been the CFO of some very, very large companies. Now, when we came into the co-working industry, what was very, very interesting for us is to see the community that gets plugged in alongside workspaces. So as I said, we're not just providing workspaces.
Correct,
If I'm in one of my centers, from when I walk into the center at 8:30, 9, when I log out at say 10:30, 11 sometimes, you have interactions with startups, you have interaction with your fellow members, etc., which creates a very, very good community. And
right,
there is a bit of a some of these communities can be gimmicky, for example, where it's not a genuine community, it's just for PR and marketing purposes. But we are growing in a very, very uh, I would say, thoughtfully progressing forward, where our community is very, very strong in terms of startups, in terms of SMEs, in terms of multiple bigger companies, our stakeholders like service providers, law firms,
right.
etc. So that the community is built, and that is what interested us in this industry, which is
Got it.
it is not just workspaces, but it is an entire community which gets built.
Right,
Now, if I speak only as far as co-working and flexible workspace industry is concerned, and I deplug acceleration and the community angle from it,
right,
see, if you look at the broader, whenever I speak to people in this industry, etc., there is an overall commercial real estate market which exists globally, and it is a very, very formidable market, right? And the co-working and flexible workspace industry started off, I think I should give credit to WeWork when it
yeah,
first launched. And they were the first people to, I think, coin or not coin, but the first movers to bring it to the global and bring it to everyone, at
correct,
least the term to everyone. And now what has happened is that because of some of the first-hand advantages that you see being offered by the flexible and the co-working industry, and if I can name a few, there is definitely a capex and an opex cost advantage that a flexible office space solution gives versus a traditional. Your
right,
the flexibility that it gives to on-demand scale up and scale down depending on your business growth, and it
right,
allows for headroom for resource planning. In terms of the amenities and employee productivity, as far as landlords and property owners are concerned, their property portfolios value both monetarily and otherwise grows with a brand like a co-working brand operating out of their facility.
right,
So in that context, co-working and flexible workspace within the broader commercial real estate sector is strongly growing, and I think the
correct,
co-working and flexible workspaces and co-working vertical will continue to integrate closely within the overall commercial real estate landscape, and it will become a more substantial part of the overall portfolio that property developers have. And this is both being driven, and I think it is being driven by demand, right?
Right.
Because the demand for flexible co-working is not just coming from startups and MSMEs. If you
Correct.
see, when I'm talking about Iksana or I talk about any other co-working operator, the demand for our solutions is coming from enterprises of different scales, whether you're a
Correct.
startup, whether you're an MSME, whether you're a big corporate, you're a Fortune 500. Various industry segments are coming into it. So whether I talk about IT, ITES, new tech companies, fintech, online gaming, health tech,
Right. Right.
e-commerce, and the traditional healthcare BFSI consulting, and both Indian and foreign companies. So, because this industry and this area is not limited to only a certain category of customers and a certain location, so I think most definitely I can say that this flexible workspace industry will continue growing. Now, uh, I may not be right about my outlook on this, but my personal outlook is that one thing which is very good about this industry is that it is not a winner-all market. It is a market which allows for different operators of different sizes,
True.
scale,
True.
and
Very
business models to operate coexistently. So, for
correct.
example, if I talk about a tier one market like Gurgaon, your traditional commercial real estate providers like DLF, Unitech have not gone away anywhere. They
Correct.
continue to grow, they continue to exist. Then you have companies like WeWork, Circle.work, and these bigger co-working companies, CoWorks, SmartWorks, etc., which are catering to a different micro cluster within Gurgaon or Noida, for example. So
Right.
even within what I'm seeing is within Noida, within Gurgaon, there are micro clusters. So if people are familiar with Gurgaon, your Cyber City or Golf Course Road, etc., will be your tier one cluster. So they are targeting because of the price point, because of the location, etc. They're catering to a different target audience. But that does not mean that there's not space for a tier two, tier three operator. When I say tier two, tier three, I mean maybe not in a golf course, but another part of Gurgaon, another
Right.
part of Noida,
Right.
at a lower price point, at a different amenities, different workspace infrastructure. And what is very interesting is that with COVID, the mindset shift of people to not travel 2 hours, 1 hours, and they were used to traveling 1 or 2 hours, that has changed, right?
Correct.
So, for example, populated cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Pune, and even tier two markets, which I talked about, which are growing in size and the traffic is increasing, commute time is
Right.
increasing, there are micro clusters evolving in every city.
Very true.
So, for
Very true.
example, coming to a place like Delhi, for example, if someone, because your audience might be more familiar with Delhi and Gurgaon, that if someone is looking for an office space, say in Malviya Nagar, while now there is a WeWork there, until
Correct.
recently there was not, they would have had to go to another local partner. Now, if their budget is not 20,000 a seat to go to a WeWork, they will go to another partner,
Right.
another co-working provider. So this market, firstly, is here to stay in terms of becoming an integral part of the overall commercial real estate portfolio. And
Right.
as far as operators are concerned, this is a very, very good market for us as well,
Correct. Correct.
because there's not going to be one single player which dominates the entire market in every single city. And thirdly, I think one thing which is very positive for this industry is the IP of AWFIS, which is again re-energized interest
Yeah.
in this space.
The trust on the sector is no, it's kind of coming of age kind of thing, right? And then I'm following AWS, hearing that many others are also going to kind of get into the IPO scene, right? So I think that will bring a lot of investor confidence into this segment, right? And one interesting trend that I'm also seeing is that, again, I know we are over time now. Maybe we elaborate it on another time. Is that a lot of operators are now offering managed office as a service, right? So it's your warm shell, right?
100%.
Maybe it's your fitted out office, but I manage it, right? So
Correct.
so where it's not, and so it's a one client, right? It's a one tenant, one property or one floor plate, owned or leased out by the client or the tenant, but then managed by an operator, right? So in the sense that, so that's another interesting play where if that becomes a little more standardized as an offering, larger enterprises who need probably 4,000 seats in a location might actually gravitate towards that. So this uh, to the point that you said, right? There's a hospitality aspect, there is a service aspect, then there's the infrastructure aspect, right? Now each of them are getting packaged in different ways also depending on the client need, right? So kind of it's very interesting to see how different solutions are emerging from offering the experience to employees, right? It could be offered through any number of ways. So I think that's a lot of different
To
ways in which you grow the market per se.
I'm very, very interesting that you brought this point up to just add to what you just said. That what is also interesting is that within the co-working and flexible workspace industry, there are about, I think, from the top of my head, 2 to 3 industry sub-industry segments which have come up, right?
Right,
So one
right,
is your pure plug-and-play co-working and hybrid seats, which is co-working seats, shared, social
correct.
working environment, events, community, less customizable, dedicated desks, smaller private offices.
Yeah,
Then there is a category which is what you just said, where it's managed service, managed space providers, where it is customizable, it is furnished as per the brand ethos of the customer. And I
right.
think both of these different segments are growing co-jointly with each other without one being more than the other. But I do think in terms of the number of the growth, I think the managed service is growing at a faster pace than
Faster
the
pace.
shared co-working.
Correct. Very true. And which is kind of in a way forcing the more co-working players to also diversify into doing managed, right? So you will like somebody like a WeWork is getting into it, somebody like a 91S is getting into doing this. AWS is has always been doing that, right? So yeah, so a lot of again, everybody's trying to look at what would make sense for their client base and trying to kind of so innovation, right? So a lot of innovations, a lot of business model changes, kind of creating a lot of different ways in which this flexible office as a service can be provided to clients. Shantanu, love the talk. I know we are way over the time that we set aside for this because
That always happens when we speak.
yeah, it always happens when you kind of like I said, right? You are so close to the rubber meeting the road, and you want to you're seeing all these uh, peculiarities happen in front of you, right? You want to kind of put that out. So thank you for doing that. And again, like I said to begin with, huge admirer of the work that you and your brother are doing. Iksana as a brand had the fortunate partnership to kind of observe this as a partner, and you've spoken about other ways in which we could work together. So super happy for your growth, and the best part is you're saying that you're doing this organically and in a bootstrap way. So certainly strong foundations. Without strong foundations, you can't be doing that, right? So congratulations on that, and I look forward to continued relationship with the brand, right? To again, like I said, right, to grow mutually and to solve problems of our customers in creative ways. So thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for sharing your perspectives on both from your views and also from the industry, zooming out from the industry at a bigger level. So thanks, Shantanu. Loved having this
Thank you,
conversation.
Sham.
Looking forward to more such interactions.
Thank you, Sham. Thank you for having me over your webinar.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Look,
Having a great evening.
thank you. Thank you, Sham.